CP2 on Munoz. I learned from shadowing others that rules need to be printed, taught, and followed through. I learned that all handbooks have to be updated, published online, given to all families in print as well, so that way they know which rule is broken during a suspension, especially Education Code 48900. It's very specific on what can be called upon for suspension. I learned about the Education Code and telling parents about forms of their educational rights and to really make sure I witness statements before kids get suspended. It's super important to do the rules of due process. That's a legal law, so we have to make sure that that is followed. Suspensions do happen at school, often in-house more than sending a kid home, so they still have a chance to learn when they're up at the office. And really, expulsions are often just last resort, or if there is an extreme safety violation. Two different principals told me all stakeholders should be in the communication loop, and that made sense. So you can't just tell one person what happened. You often have to send out an email. And then I learned that if you're on campus, or whether you have an online campus, all educational rules apply, whether it's charter, a public school, a special needs school, all schools have rules, they must be followed. Suspension is really based on the severity of the incident and the law the student broke. For example, if they were to hurt a teacher, that is a very high offense, versus if they were just messing around, pushing, and kids being kids, we can do some restorative justice and get them some better ways to work out their differences. One principal told me don't be in haste to suspend. Make sure all the details and facts are online first. I learned how valuable it is to contact family and offer restorative justice. One site really pushed hard for restorative justice, and I felt a good climate there. I did personally spend a lot of time looking up due process. I knew a great deal about manifestation determination when I used to translate. Yet the due process, according to the Constitution, was a good read. When I looked it up, it talked about the Fifth and 14th Amendment. Each contain a due process clause. I didn't know that till I had this assignment. Due process deals with administration and making sure everything is taken care of. Since due process comes from the Constitution, the 14th Amendment states that no state can deprive any person of their life, liberty, or process without due process of the law. And I wanted to quote that because it's a very long statement and I've never looked it up before. It was very interesting. But pretty much you have your basic rights to legal proceedings such as a trial. I also looked up how due process affects suspension or expulsions. Every student has the right to education. They cannot be deprived of their rights. If there's something like a suspension or expulsion, they must have due process and a fair hearing. And I know everybody got education, like a free and public education, but I didn't know that everybody had the right to a due process to make sure there's a right, fair hearing, and that totally made sense to me if it's in the Constitution. It also really gave a specification of what has to happen, like they have to know what specific rule was broken, especially like the Educational Code ED 48900. There can be a third-person panel. I haven't seen that yet, but now I know that's possible. And definitely I've seen schools where they bring evidence and witness on the student's behalf. And bringing legal counsel, I've seen that. And to have the hearing be closed to the public to protect the privacy of the student, I have heard of that as well. My big three takeaways is suspensions has to include data, witness reports, forms, and parents' contact. All the principals highly recommended restorative justice because in many of the towns I worked at, they're small country towns and they need to be able to work out their differences. Kids are just kids. They'll be impulsive and do things. We need to teach them the right way to do things so they can get better. Suspension can happen at any grade levels from kindergarten, pre-K, all the way up to high school and college. Just remember to have safety first and that everybody stays safe. And expulsion is usually a last case scenario unless a massive violation of the law and the cops are brought in. It's really important to follow the due process procedure and to bring in legal counsel And I've seen that with students in certain scenarios where the lawyers were brought on both sides. And a manifestation determination can happen, and those I've translated for. So once again, my takeaway was to have all your forms filled out, parent contacted, and restorative justice. Make sure they know what law is broken at any age level, cite your ed code, and definitely bring in legal counsel so a due process and a manifestation determination could take place. Thank you. I learned a lot from this process.